Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Welcome on the Lights and Data Show. It's been about a week or so since we've been live, so we're excited to have Sharad back on again, the CEO from OvalEdge, to talk to us about how really the business glossaries could help us with that data literacy.
I would like to introduce Sharad a little bit. Although everyone knows Sharad, I still want to introduce him. He is an ace technologist turned entrepreneur. Technology Headline puts him in the list of the top 50 successful Indian entrepreneurs in the US. He has founded OvalEdge to blend his unique experience in big data technology and process management into creating a much needed data management product. Before founding OvalEdge, Sharad was a principal architect at the innovative software firm Hortonworks, now merged with Cloudera. He has a nuclear engineering degree from IIT, the premier institute of technology in India. Welcome, Sharad. And I wanted to ask you for the first time in our encounters, can you tell us a little bit about your hobbies, something personal?
Oh wow! I don't know other than work, what is my personal thing, but the work is my hobby. I think that makes me excited
Wonderful.
to keep working all the time.
Which really shows because you're really growing your product and you're always putting amazing content out there. So it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, but I think we
And
started
from
with some hiking here and there, so we're trying to do at least pursue some hobby and some health. So, but other than that, work is my hobby.
which is
Very nice.
great. I don't know how many people can say that. I think it's amazing. And as George said, to echo that, I find that I think we meet every month or every month and a half. And every time there's new things that have happened at OvalEdge and news that can be shared, which is great.
Yeah,
So
I think
congratulations for that.
thank you. But yeah, we're working hard to make sure that we grow this company and we give them the product which everybody needs.
Exactly. But speaking of hobbies and hiking, David here was mentioning that he's actually hiking right now, but he's looking forward to rewatch this when the time comes, just so as he knows he's going to learn quite a little bit about it.
Wonderful.
So business
That's what
glossaries.
I call passionate and dedicated.
Absolutely. So business glossary, Sharad, and the data literacy. Data literacy seems to be a very hot topic, and it's something that any organization should invest into. And is that for any sort of information worker, anybody working with data that you think should be data literate?
I think so. The thing is that why there is a need for data literacy and suddenly now, right? If we look back and kind of like trying to understand this, the idea is that like the companies, which companies are successful. If you take any company which is successful company, whether it's a Uber or Amazon or any company which is not a technology company, is successful because they are using data on their advantage, right? So, and whether it's a you are an oil and gas company or a nuclear utilities or anything, if you are not using data to your advantage, then what will happen is that only the utilities companies will survive because you need energy anyway. But what about healthcare? What about other companies? They will have a hard time catching up and competing in this marketplace, because data can give you a very strategic advantage on your company's growth curve, as well as using the bottom line or increasing the top line. So if the data is giving you the strategic advantage, then the first thing what you have to do is use data, and the data is there in the systems and in people's mind, right? The information of the data is in people's mind, and until and unless this information can come out and go out, and more people are using it, then only people can start using the data for the good of the work, right? So until unless everybody is literate about the data and how to use it and how not to use it, then how would you make a data-driven digital transformation or anything like that? So we don't want to give you the data, but you become data literate. No, it's not going to work. Or you don't become data literate, but help me drive the company innovation. No, it's not going to work anyway. So until unless everybody is data literate as well as little bit technology literate, then only the the digital transformation and anything can happen. But even though the technology literacy, you can hire people who are literate about the technology, but the data literacy, you have to invest into it so that people, because this is your data, that is your strategic advantage, and you have to put in people's hand, and that's what the data literacy is.
Well said. And before we go into to see how the business glossary can help with that data literacy, let's make sure that we're on the same page on what a business glossary represents, because I think it might mean different things to different people. So let's just clarify that and see what the benefits are, and then we'll see how it addresses the data literacy. So in your view, Sharad, what does the business glossary help us do?
Yeah. So, so there is a difference between the business glossary and the data catalog, right? Generally, people say, "Oh, the data catalog is business glossary." So that's not. So the data catalog is the catalog of all the data you have available, right? So it's a catalog of all the data you have it, and the business glossary is a standard of the definitions. So when we call about the standard of the definitions, so for example, you might have data about the, say, let's take an example about the personal information. So people can call the personal information as, oh, this is a PII information or personally identifiable information, or some and healthcare industry will call them PHI information. So that the same information can have different namings.
Right.
So the objective of business glossary is to standardize it across the company, and especially around the KPIs, the key performance indicators. How would you standardize those definitions so that people understand the same definition across the company? I have seen companies use a key performance indicator which goes directly to their balance sheet, and they do not have a proper definitions. Like especially like if you go to healthcare reports tend to stay on their balance sheet. So if you go to any hospital, they have it there, and everybody is calculating differently, and then they finally aggregate. It's not going to work, right? There is a problem somewhere. So every definitions, if they are not standard, there's no proper standard definitions out there, then it's difficult to implement any aspect of the data. And the business glossary main objective is to standardize the definition across the company and then make it popular. That is the another area we can talk about it. What are the different tips and techniques you can use to
and get it socialized and
socialize it? Yeah.
And and you mentioned that sometimes it's really different information or the same information belonging to different terminologies, like the PII, the PHI example. And sometimes I find it's always, or also the other way around. So you have the same term, but with different definitions for different people, depending who you're talking to. So I think the business glossary can help clarify that as well and make sure that there's no conflict when two individuals are talking to another. They can refer to the business glossary and they know that now they're talking about the same thing. And I have a very quick story that came to mind is, you drive around, you go downtown, you want to park, and there's these parking meters that you got to pay. But now there's also this phone app that you can just pay everything through the phone app. You don't need to put the coins in the parking meter anymore. And I know like the new CEO to this one kind of company that was developing the app came in to the work, first day on the job, he's asking, okay, give me a report with all the customers. And he got a report, but with so many totals that had customer next to it. It's like, what's going on? Why are you giving me different sums for what I've asked? And it was because of the different departments that had different meanings of what the customer meant. So one of them was, well, anybody that downloads our app, that's our customer already. Another one's like, well, no, anybody that is not just downloading it, but also paying for the app. For whatever the time that they want to book there for parking. And another one said, well, that too, but if they haven't paid in like more than a year now, they're not our customer anymore. We need to reacquire them. So I think the business glossary can also help clarify some of these differences too,
and also come up with that is where the data literacy comes into it. The customers are somebody who have paid it. but those are maybe the prospects, those may be the leads. You give them the new name and popularize it
Right.
and make it better so that people talk the same language. And when you download the customer information from, say, your different reporting systems, you get the same information and there is no confusion around it. And then you understand what is the cost of acquisition for the, all these are different aspect of it. Otherwise, how would you take any decisions around those areas? So that's, I think you get a very good example. Like, that's, we see this with our customer base everywhere. Like, in fact, not only customer base, within our organization also, we see that, like, it's difficult. We are implementing business glossary, but it's still, it takes time to come up with the standard definition and then popularize it. So it takes time.
For sure, especially for some of these common terms, I guess, like customer, which you need to involve multiple departments. And as you're involving more and more people and departments, the discussions can be lengthier, and yeah, it takes time for sure. Diana, you wanted to mention something?
Yeah, no, I had a question. So what would a business glossary include then? What are the elements of a business glossary?
So business glossary generally have a term, what the term we are defining, its definition, what the definition you are having it, right? Then you need to make sure that who is the steward, who is maintaining it, and then you need to also have some sort of information that, okay, like, what is the approval process for this, right? Is there approval council which you need to approve it, or is it somebody created that? What is the approval mechanism for this is? And then the most important thing is you have to really associate this, but wherever this is getting used, right? So that the idea is that if the business glossary is there, which is the definition around everything, that's good. But okay, tell me where it's used, and that is where I think the real challenge is that, okay, I put the definitions at some places. If most of the time people put a business glossary, believe me or not, and they have a spreadsheet, fancy spreadsheet, we put all the terms, the data governance team sit together, they put it, and they put it in a shelf, and then nobody's using it, and nobody's aware about it. Then it's like, what is the purpose of it, right? It needs to get popularized with every business processes everywhere. That is the main objective of the business glossary, to popularize it into it. So those are the another component which should have it, and that is needed for the adoption of the business glossary. And then most of the time, for compliance reason, sometimes you want to make sure that is it a confidential information, or is it a non-confidential information, is it a privacy information, what kind of compliances are there. That is also very, very helpful. And then those are and then you also want to keep some other information, whatever you want to track with that. So since you are associating all this information there, any other information you want to track regarding the committees and internal processes, that is also important. Those are the some areas where we see most of the time people track this in the business glossary. Then maybe I think George can say a little bit more to that, what else he sees, what people associate with the business glossary.
I've seen organizations that have maybe more than 50 sort of attributes for a business term in their business glossary entry. So sometimes it can maybe be a little bit over the top. I guess some do need all that level of detail. But sometimes you kind of have to balance it out and make sure that you're not putting 100 fields there for that data steward to fill out whenever a new entry needs to be added. But I mean, I can think of some common other attributes, like just the synonym and other related terms and processes, just to kind of help again that with that data literacy and navigate the verbiage, the language that the organization might use. Just to, I guess, offer a way for people to also search for the synonym, but then actually find the approved business term instead.
Yes.
And a data element there. And there's definitely some technical metadata. Sometimes there's some data classification that tells you, well, this is highly confidential data, or this is low impact data.
Or for, yeah, it's confidentiality, privacy, compliance. Those are the various reasons. And then yeah, I mean, that's come to the another topic, is that how do you organize your business glossary? That's where I think that's 50 fields you see it. I mean, we in our application we support like any number of fields you can add, and we have I think 100 fields, and people have like crossed all the fields. Like we have implementation like what, like are they using these many fields? But people like bigger organization have those needs, so they are
Oh,
like kind of
absolutely.
using all the fields. Yeah.
And it's always great to have the field tied to a reference element, reference data field, just so people can choose from a drop down instead of typing it in as a comment that would hold all that information. And Garima here is mentioning that Business Glossary is one of the very important artifact within data governance. We can't agree with you more. And also for delivering data lineage. So bringing out the harmonization throughout the organization is a time-consuming, but definitely worth it. Positive discussion. Thank you for listening in, Garima.
I wanted to ask who is in charge, or who should have the initiative of creating a business glossary, and how does that person get buy-in from the organization?
That is a very good question, Diana. Let me take a take on that. So generally speaking, this comes under the chief data officer's domain, this specific thing. Generally, a data governance manager has been identified for this purpose, a specific purpose, and he or she is generally responsible for it. The good part, I will take a little bit on this one, is to mention how the industry is getting better on it. I generally see in our customer base 50-50 ratio between he and she. So it's just to see that how good this data industry is in terms of gender equality, what we are seeing it, mentioning it. So generally speaking, that the data governance manager is responsible for at least to creating an effort about maintaining those business glossary. Now it's come down to who should be involved in maintaining the business glossary. That is where I think we are proposing is two approaches. One is the top-down approach, and another the bottoms-up approach. So say, for example, your organization is new, like let's say is a new, or they're creating a new initiative. Then you sit together, you come up with your business terms, which you're going to measure, or what are the key performance indicators are. You have to go and define the definitions, and you put it into business glossary. So that is a very simple approach if you are a standard organization and a new upcoming organization. And if you are an existing organization and you grew out of acquisition, merger, or you grew out of like a lot of departments and then grew into it, then in that case you have to use bottoms-up approach. And bottoms-up approach means that you have to literally go and use those. Say, for example, you want to, again, suppose there is a hospital, and the hospital is growing out in the multiple organization, and there's a term called length of stay. So you want to figure out that, okay, who is using these terms, and whom should be the part of the process who is going to maintain it, right? Because they are using those terms, so they should be on board of what should be the final definition of the business glossary of the length of stay is. So you have to get those on board, and then you have to find out their management process and where this information is used. Like suppose there are 100 reports which use length of stay, for example. Then you need to make sure that who those consumers are who's using those reports, who are those executives who is using those major decisions, find out who is making the major decision around it, and then from that create a governance council or a process around that, discuss with them, and then come up with the proper definition of it. Sometimes that process is very lengthy, and that's why you need a data analysis to conduct in order to build the business glossary. That how can you which departments are using it, which departments are not using it, which individuals are using it, whom to include and whom not to include. You don't want to include everybody to have a discussion around for any specific term. Hopefully there are not too many, but there are. Most of the organization have quite a bit terms which need a general consensus. So It's not so easy to just say, oh, there is a artificial intelligence is going to take it and then going to build the business glossary, or there is a AI which is just going to build it. AI can suggest you, okay, these are the look like same, and it can be the same, and you should consider that. It can be a tool, but ultimately there is the consensus process is the key for bottoms up approach in that area of building that. So those are the two things which we are seeing a lot, and it works out pretty well in the organization. George, you want to take your take into it?
No, I agree with you, and I think to your point, I think it's one of the most important artifacts that the data governance office program needs to come up with. And I agree with the bottom up and top down approach. It really depends on your needs, your own culture as well. What I think it's challenging is when you do have to include, as I mentioned, all those departments, have all those discussions, and there's always all these different nuances. But sometimes, like you mentioned before, Sharad, sometimes new terms come out of it. So there's these agreements, vastly disagreements between what the definitions should be. Well, then you realize we're actually talking about two different things.
Yeah.
So we need to create new terms for that. And of course, then you need
your
to.
example, right? The customers, let's
Yeah.
like those customers who is signing up, and those who are they are not the customer, they are prospects. So let's use this as a prospect. Although you can treat them as a customer as well, but because they are not paying, so let's use them as a prospect. Let's use them as a customer, or give them a new name called free customers, or get them as a customer, right? So you have to give them new naming, new way to organize the data, and it's totally. I think that the coming up with the newer names, it should
Yeah.
be the part of that. And
Yeah.
and generally speaking, the one of the thing I generally tell everybody is when they're deciding the business glossary that please do not use a one simple name. Always trying to say, existing customers, new customers, if you are doing and defining the business glossary, so that help you. If you have two conventional, two mechanism, average length of stay, so use some sort of a mechanism to use one word here and there, trying to like that simplifies quite a bit, and then use more and more in that area.
Right. We have a great question here that just came in from Naomi, and I think we need to address it. Do you have a measurement for the business glossary adoption rate between having a tool like OvalEdge versus a spreadsheet in SharePoint that never land? My company tells data literacy, but does not want to invest in a tool to enhance ease of use. So have you seen any sort of difference between companies using OvalEdge versus just an Excel spreadsheet to start tracking their business glossary?
So so the first thing is that in a spreadsheet you don't know who is using it, right? So it becomes very difficult to even track it. In OvalEdge we have a out of the box functionality, so you can track how much usage is happening. So the one thing which we see mostly is if you just have business glossary in OvalEdge also, you put it there, then also people are not going to look into it. Why should they, instead of, because the first thing, they don't know where the business glossary exists, right? The problem is that it's the integration between the business glossary to the data catalog, right? That's the key component there, as well as the systems where the data is used. For example, if you are using Tableau and you are using reports, are you integrating your business glossary to the reporting, where the key performance indicators, where the data is really used, are they mentioned there? Is there a mechanisms are there where, and that is where we see adoption growing for OvalEdge, is that because we have plugins with Power BI, Tableau, Snowflake kind of systems, where people can right click and see what the definitions are, right? So that is where the adoption grows. Adoption is in a spreadsheet is a otherwise it's the same tool. Whether you put it in a spreadsheet or OvalEdge is a little more scalable. Like you can in business glossary only limited number you can do it, and it's hard to find and something. But that's a limited advantage. But the real advantage comes through adoption, through plugins and those kind of things. When you integrate and everybody is aware, oh, okay, this is what exactly it is, and that is why we see a lot of adoption grow using those plugins and those kind of tools and tips and techniques. And that's something that I wanted to talk. I'm glad that she asked this question.
And Naomi, I would say that you can always start with that spreadsheet, sure, but it's not scalable at all. I mean, you pass maybe like 20 terms, and you can already see it's hard to manage in a spreadsheet. So a tool is definitely the way to go. And I'll give you this one other example in terms of the value that it's really saving you. The IDC, which stands for, I think, the International Data Consortium, they did a survey a few years ago. They were surveying 600 businesses across 4 verticals: financial, government, manufacturing, and healthcare. And they found out that the average information worker, so that's anybody that really interacts with data in one way or another, they don't need to manage it themselves or do data stewardship or data quality checks or anything. No, they can just consume reports, for example. So they realized out of the survey, they were saying that the average information worker spends about 9.5 hours every week searching for information. And you can account that to be about, I don't know, $15,000 each year if you add all these hours up, which is a lot of waste. And out of 9.5 hours, 3.5 hours, they were really searching for this information, but not finding what they were looking for. And even if you have your Excel spreadsheet in a SharePoint, environment, like SharePoint is great for searching stuff. It's not great for finding stuff. So definitely a dedicated tool like OvalEdge would help reduce that time wasted to searching for information.
And the one thing I want to mention is that the context is very important. So what happened in the business in the spreadsheet, that you don't have a context. So that where this information come from, the lineage aspect, or that where the data is really associated to it. So for example, you have a list of definitions, all the things, which is good stuff, you can maintain in a spreadsheet. But once you come to, and you do not have a context, and the context cannot go here, and then each other and the vice versa, that is important. And I think you already gave that why should anybody invest into it, the 9.5 hours per person productivity is huge, and the number of people, and then you divide that. So one person's job can pay for the tool, and then the rest of them enjoy for a ride, right? So it's important to, I think that sometime it's important to invest in software technologies because it saves time and effort and make things faster. And sometimes people say that, I just want to take a little bit on that, is that sometimes people feel that, time, I save the time, that's the only value. No, it's not that is the only value. It's you are able to achieve that work much more faster, and your digital transformation journey is faster, and that is the real value. In our market, like, you have to come early, and in any market, if you are in competing with Amazon for retail, Amazon is already out in 1 hour delivery or one day delivery. How can you move that? Otherwise, they will have all the competitive advantage. Like Walmart will not have that competitive advantage, but Amazon have it. So similar to that is that, like, the time to market is the key in today's world. Otherwise, the competitors will catch on, and they're going to take on this. So sometimes, this is just a time saving. No, I can still hire 2 interns. Things will be done by them. No, it's making things faster is the key to the competitive landscape.
Listening to you, Sharad, what I really like is how you combine this part regarding business glossary and everything that we talked about data with the business knowledge that you offer at OvalEdge. So I think half of the things that you say are very relevant for the business side, and I think OvalEdge solves a lot of those problems.
Oh, I think we lost Diana there. Yeah, absolutely. We also have another.
With me?
Yeah, you're back now. We also have another comment here.
Good.
Well, a question really from Rahul, and he's mentioning that when we start Business Glossary, we start with few domains, but idea of Business Glossary is to make common definition across the enterprise. So how do we promote a domain term to enterprise level? It's not possible to talk to every domain to define a term. So what is the industry's best practices to start glossary in enterprise level?
I think the question also have an answer to it, and we see this problem everywhere. So the first thing what we say is that create a one domain for enterprise and create one domain for your own department. So the one thing is that let's create do not always try to create the business glossary for at the enterprise level is too much to manage if the enterprise is big, right? So at least create the department level business glossary first. In a year you'll be able to get all the department level business glossary at the different department level, and then go towards enterprise. And then in the meantime you can keep focusing. Okay, let's say the customer term is this used across the department is the same, then let's move it to the enterprise level, and one or two departments is not using the customer name term, convince them. So first get the consensus at the department level individually, then move it to the enterprise level, and then convince the department. And at the time you have integrated everything, so it will be much more easier for communication down. If the tool is implemented, then okay, we already implemented the tool and it's already integrated everywhere, so it's easier to communicate down. Now instead of customer we were using, say for example, common customer term, or we are using prospects. Now the customer has moved to prospects. And if you have a tool that you know where it's safely used, you just change their field name, and then it's easier that way. If you're not using tool, then it becomes difficult. That okay, how do I manage it now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you can have some different techniques and tactics for managing at the enterprise level as well.
Right. Well said. Yeah, Naomi's, by the way, thankful for the information that we provided. And Garima was mentioning that they've started at SharePoint initially too, but now having a tool definitely brings up a lot of benefits. You can define not only the business meaning of the respective term, but you can also define the meaning of your physical data, given the scope of your content. So it's that tie into the technical metadata.
That's what it is.
And Sharad, do you recommend, what's let's say the order in which you do things? Do you implement the data catalog first and then the business glossary, or they go in parallel, or the other way around? What's your recommendation?
So if most of the organization generally, if they're new, they do not have problem with this glossary. So I generally start with data catalog first, because it's technical. You can just collect every information in 2 weeks, and then you have the data catalog built. Now start building your business glossary from there. So from the bottoms up approach. Sometimes you can go to top down approach as well to have the business glossary. If you already have a business glossary already, then the effort comes in, or somewhere in a spreadsheet or somewhere in there, then comes down, okay, let's have this, and then integrate with data catalog, and now start implementing more business glossary. Mm-hmm. So that's generally, because data catalog does not take long because it's automation now. Earlier, when the automation was not there, that was used to take time. And now it's automation. You just connect to your different databases, Power BI, your Tableaus, your Snowflakes, your SQL Server data warehouses, your data, and then it's just pull up all this information you have at one place. So it's very easy now.
Right. And Shilpi, very nice to see you here. She's asking, does the tool help gathering various different definitions for the existing for a term?
Yeah, that's the idea, right? So there are different terms at different places. You can gather all this term at one place, and now you can analyze it and you see, this is the terms. It does not make sense, but it makes sense. That's the whole idea of the product is.
Right.
From a collaboration perspective, what are the processes behind it? So there's several ownerships, I believe, for the same term. So how do people contribute or change the business glossary? How do they update it?
So for that we generally so in our data governance framework, what we recommend is that before you start building the business glossary, let's create a governance council first. The objective of the governance council is that you identify different domain, which areas you're going to maintain, and then from the business owner perspective, identify executive leadership from those domain perspectives. You want to buy in from your VP of sales. It needs some sort of executive sponsorship as well. If the executive sponsorship is not there, your data governance program is not going to be successful, very good. because it's need that support from them, right? And this just need a support. It's just need a. It doesn't need a like their involvement, but need their support. So once you get their support, and then you bring those people together, then you create a governance council. Now, once you have the governance council in place, then you discuss that, okay, now for this particular domain, we only need um, three of the executives buy in. Let's get the consensus built up and let's move on. And the role of that is the data governance manager. That is their job, to find out who to get the consensus and how to get this going. And then you generally, I speaking, is like they should meet at least once a month, the governance council, to discuss any outstanding issues, anything around that, so that they will be able to take care of all this. The pending work is there. So that's a best practices, but best practice, but does not mean that you cannot meet every 2 weeks, or does not meet as you can meet in 6 weeks. It depending upon your company culture, how you want to meet it. And also like having a sometime like we see that like they don't meet, but they provide approval process through the product, and then, oh, we just approve it and that's good, so we don't have to meet anywhere. That's good. If you define your processes very nicely, then you don't have to meet, and you can just have do through the processes as well. So it depends upon company to company, but executive leadership is involvement is necessary, as well as when the collaboration from different group is identifying the people is very important. Otherwise, it becomes a challenge that, otherwise you will not include everybody into the business glossary building process. Then they will say, no, I still use customer. I don't use prospect. And my report is still showing customer. Then the confusion will be there. And then some reports will show customer, some report will show prospect. So it need to be able to have the consensus built up. It's very important. And that is why the integration with various existing tool sets and whatever you use, it's highly important, so that you can search it, you can measure it. Like suppose, for example, you want to search a definition around anything, you can go on Google and you look into it.
Yeah.
You cannot put your business glossary into the Google, because Google does not provide that. So that's why you need a standard, a catalog, and business glossary tool like OvalEdge, so that you can do all these things.
Right. We have another great question here. What's the best practice or approach at what point in the life cycle of data we should add to catalog and to the glossary?
So the best practice here is you should start implementing the tool first. Then you start doing anything. If you're new to the journey of, say, data warehousing, you're new to the journey of building this structure, you want to put the standard first. Mm-hmm. That is you want to create a process first. It will become much more easier for you to maintain all these aspects later on. Otherwise, you keep creating the problem bigger and bigger, and then it becomes difficult to manage the problem. So it's like generally speaking, the business glossary is like a project management. Right. So if you want to work on a project, you want to make sure that you are managing it first. If you don't have a project management, you can still execute it for a certain point, but then it becomes difficult to manage without a project management system in place.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the business glossary is kind of a kind of one of the area of your data project management aspect of it. One of the aspect of data project management.
Well said. So then Mohammed has a question on what are the main skills and qualifications for a competent data governance manager?
Take George's course.
I appreciate it.
And that is the number one thing. And then you should have a little bit learning around like there are a couple of components which you need to learn to become a competent data governance manager. Understand the data governance terminology, and should have some experience in data field. Like you should be, if you are working in the data, that means you are aware about the problems, and that makes you a competent data governance manager. It's not a rocket science. It's not too difficult. It can be learned very easily. This is the proper processes are there. That's the course can tell you, and that based on that you can just learn a little bit, and then you make it. It's a your it can be using a product and some sort of a implementation part. You can very easily become a data governance manager if you have some experience there. And believe me, now there is a lot of job opportunities for data governance manager out there in the market. We see all the time, like.
Yeah, and Glassdoor, I think, by the way, they were averaging it out around 100 between $100,000 $140,000 a year, depending, I guess, where you are in the country and what organization you're working for. So it's definitely a great career path to go on. I would also have to add to what Sharad mentioned is, I think from a like soft skill perspective, you definitely need to have some of those people skills, and in particular the communication skills. There will
Yes.
be a lot of talking, a lot of meetings to lead and to convince people to get to a consensus, especially when it comes to some of these definitions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, one thing I want to mention here is that it's also a kind of a stepstone to become a CDO.
hmm,
Yeah, most of the data governance manager I have seen get promoted to CDOs very
right,
easily, because they
right,
have the experience, they have soft skills to maintain that. Okay, I'm maintaining this governance, and then I have done this work to, because CDO's also role is how do I create the value from multiple departments, multiple things. That's where the soft skills comes into very, like project managers are very good. Project manager who have some data experience are a very good candidate for data governance manager role, because they have the project management skills, they have communication skills, and they can also use some, if they have data skills, that's a perfect role for them as well.
right. And I know Diana was mentioning to me many times the importance of change management in all of this too.
Yeah, change management is the key aspect of data governance management.
Right, right.
And of business in general. I think every area benefits from knowledge and change management. So coming back to the business glossary, can you tell us a little bit, Sharad, how OvalEdge can help an organization build a business glossary?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, you can use top-down approach or bottom-up approach to build the business glossary. So top-down approach is, so we have a tool called Business Glossary, right? So you can write all the terms, and you can search it, you can do all the things. That is a good part. But the major part of the product is how can you build your data, which is in reports, various reports like Tableau, Power BI, like all the reports are there, and major data objects like data warehouses like Snowflakes or the SQL servers, where people like really like Teradata's kind of thing, where they maintain all the data, as well as like applications like Salesforce, SAP, where the terms are really maintained. So you crawl all this information at one place. So you have a data catalog of everything. And since you know now that catalog is a component which takes care of all the data, as well as it also keep track that what the relationship of this data is, how this data is in this report is used by this table here, this table is used by this table here. It knows everything. So since it knows everything, now it becomes easier to build the business glossary, because it knows if you want to make a term, then okay, how this term is used in business glossary here, sorry, how this term is used in Tableau, you can go out and track it all the way to the system and say, hey, in this system, in SAP, we call it A, in system data warehouse, we're calling it B, while in our Tableau report, we're calling it C. Because Tableau used by the executives, this SAP used by some different owners, so different people are using different things, and the same term is traveling and calling it different names. So it's easier to find that linkage, and that's the context is easier. So that tool help you to identify those kind of things, and so that you can track through it and you can start building the business glossary.
Wonderful.
And in order to access then the business glossary, is it something that's installed on an intranet or something that's online, can be accessible from wherever you are? What are the options there?
So the options are right now is it's installed inside customer's firewall, so that it's not available on internet, so that all your data is inside your intranet only, so that
more secure.
more security way, because it's your data is also connected to those. So you don't want to put your data to internet. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why you keep it within the intranet, and everybody have their own accounts. They log in through their Active Directory or whatever the system they are using for single sign-on. They go and sign in, and then they use it. And sometimes they use plugins, right? So they are on Tableau or Power BI or whatever the tools they are using. They just right-click or they click on it and they see the information from there. So the plugin is very helpful. So it's on browser. So wherever they go, they see the information from wherever they need. So that's
I
the end user adoption point of view.
I think that's the key, because so many times you're implementing a tool, but then you're adding a barrier to the adoption by not having it easily accessible. And by integrating it with reports, reporting platforms such as Tableau, Power BI, I think you're really opening up the doors and the road to that data literacy that you were mentioning earlier on. So I think that's a great feature to have, and I think it's a must-have for any business glossary tool. Yeah, so I'm very happy to hear that OvalEdge is doing that.
Yeah, and it's one of the most prominent part of our like kind of tool sets.
Yeah. Mohammed, you touched about this a couple of times now, but Mohammed was wondering if you have a favorite approach, top down or bottom up.
My favorite is top down because it's simple, but it's not implementable practical because it's because the organization is always have a lot of implement like all the term is already used everywhere. So it depends if the term is not used everywhere. If you know, then do the top down. If the term is used everywhere, then the bottoms up. And
Hmm.
it's a very simple decision. If you go to organization, I can if I go to an organization, I can sense it that whether they need a bottoms up and tops down approach because you know the number of people and the organization. If you go to a big hospital chain which have 10 hospitals and something, you know that you need a bottoms up approach. If you go to a bigger organization like Amazon or somebody, you need a bottoms up approach. But if you go to a smaller organization, you probably need a top down approach. If you're a community bank or something, then probably top down is good enough for you.
Right, right. And Rahul has a follow-up on how do we differentiate an attribute to define it as business glossary or data dictionary? Not all terms in any domain can be defined as business glossary. Not 100% sure what you mean by this question, but I don't know if Sharad,
I think
you're
the from in my perspective is that the data dictionary is a dictionary of all the data, right? It's a non-standard. It's like okay, you define the data, what exactly it is. The business glossary is a standard term. That means that okay, this is what the standards are. This is what exactly the definitions are.
Mhm.
The what the overlay support is that integration between the business glossary and data dictionary together. So once you have a business glossary defined and you put into the dictionary, then it becomes the standards. That means you are acknowledging that this data is actually the standard. And if you think this is not a standard, you should not put the business glossary to it. You should define a new standard. For example, we happens like it's very simple example. You have a sometime you have an address
Mhm.
where the address, first name, last name, everything is stored at one place. Sometimes you have a address one, address two, city, state, zip code, is separate. So in that area, you can say that okay, our standard is a address one, address two, and so that you can aggregate by city, you can figure it out, things like that. But certain field where the users are typing, you might have address field as well. So define your standard and say, okay, this is a complete address. You define a name called complete address and associate your business glossary of address one, address two, address three to the complete address as well. So whenever the complete address is mentioned, use complete address, and wherever address one is mentioned, use address one. So you're defining everything as a standard, and you're saying this is the complete address, this is address one, address two, and there should be no address then, because address becomes difficult to understand because have a confusion. So remove that confusion by removing the address and keep those namings: complete address, address one, address two, city, state, zip code. So there's no confusion that way.
Thanks for that clarification.
So,
So I do want to encourage everybody to check out OvalEdge's blog because they have a piece on the business glossary, well, and a lot of other very insightful articles. But please go check it out. I'll post a link in the comments as well, so you can just click on it and go read this further. And definitely go to OvalEdge, go for a demo, see what it's all about, and see how it's really going to match your needs.
And of course, connect with Sharad, who is a wealth of information in this area.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm available on LinkedIn or Twitter.
That's great. Please follow him. As if you don't know this already, but he's full of golden nuggets that he's providing every time that he comes on the show. So, and we're hoping to having him back again. But until then, thank you everybody for watching and tuning in today, and for seeing how the business glossaries could help an organization become more data literate.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you, everyone.
And support. And thank you, Sharad, for being here.
Thank you, Diana and
Thank
George.
you.
Thank you so much.